All right, let's go ahead and get started. I see some familiar faces in the attendees list, and I wanted to just say hello, and I hope everybody is holding up okay after a pretty chaotic last 10 days or so. I know that it's been really tough for everybody. I know that your time is valuable, and I also know that you have some questions about phase two. And so I wanted to go through a PowerPoint very quickly, and as you guys are having questions, you feel free to pop them in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many as we can in the time that we have allotted. We have some other staff members from the Long Center here that are not on camera, but are taking notes for us so we can help translate this stuff into an FAQ and make sure that we can respond to your questions as adequately as possible. So having said that, I'm going to share my screen again and kind of walk through this PowerPoint. And there was a question about whether this will be a recording available. Yes, we are recording this webinar, and our plan is to post it on the Save Austin Venues webpage that the Long Center hosts, where you found some other information. Our intention is also to update the FAQ and also provide a link for you to enter the submission portal for phase two. So hopefully all that stuff will get done by tomorrow at the very latest. So again, thank you guys for coming. We're going to try to roll through this as quickly as possible and make sure that we answer everybody's questions as quickly as we can. So here are the things that we kind of wanted to talk to you about today, give you a brief overview, let you know that there's some key dates that we had anticipated and that have changed in the last week or so, given the winter weather stuff that's been happening. Talk to you a little bit about the different parts of how we understand phase two to be implemented. Talk to you a little bit more about your eligible expenses, and then also talk about how you can anticipate awards and monthly distributions. Is my screen not being shared? Hold on a minute. There. I think maybe that's a way that, I think I've got everybody's screen. I'm sharing my screen now. Okay, so this is kind of the agenda that I just ran through. First, I kind of wanted to just talk a little bit about the Long Center's role as administrator of this program. So we were hired by the City of Austin to administer this $5 million fund. You know, the folks that are here today have received the first $20,000 emergency grant portion of this that we were able to get out relatively quickly to a large portion of folks. And we are about to kick off the phase two stuff. So our responsibility from a legal standpoint is to administer the program according to the program guidelines that were adopted by City Council. That gives us a little bit of room for interpretation, but it also gives us a pretty finite roadmap in terms of what we're able to do and what we're not able to do. So having said that, let's talk about the different parts of the program. So who is eligible to receive phase two funds? Eligible recipients are specifically those that have already received an emergency grant. The components, again, have to do with technical assistance, creating an equity strategic plan, going through a submission portal that will allow us to ask you guys a series of questions that scores you guys, your venues on two specific indices. The first is a vulnerability index, and the second is an impact index, and those are pulled directly from the resolutions that created the SAVES Fund. Next, we'll talk about how you quantify your eligible expenses and how awards can be anticipated subsequent to that. So here are the key dates that have been adjusted in the last week. We had anticipated originally that the first equity strategic plan stuff was going to be rolled out last week. Obviously, that didn't happen with people not having access to infrastructure like electricity, water, and internet. Those dates have been rescheduled, and as well as the portal opening, which we had anticipated to happen last week. We anticipate that the portal will be open tomorrow, and we will be sending out a notification to everybody by email, letting you know that there's a link that's active and ready to be utilized to roll through the first set of submission type stuff. The first equity strategic plan training series sessions will now take place on March 2nd, 4th, and 15th. The second session will take place on April 12th and 13th. And then the third session will take place on May 4th and 5th. We had initially anticipated that the initial round of funding would come out mid-March based on venues' submission to our portal, our ability to provide some scoring, and then getting people hooked up with both Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts for a technical assistance evaluation and the first set of email links to sign up for these new equity strategic plan sessions. So for the workshops, we have a new set of links that we will be sending over to people to re-register for those new sessions. There wasn't a way for us to port those things over to anybody. So unfortunately, that's kind of where we're at with that. So to give you guys a little bit more of an anticipation about what the technical assistance looks like, these are no-cost services that are available to venues should there be a need. So the way that this process will work is we have contracted with Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts to help us with some technical assistance evaluations, essentially saying, do you feel like you need extra help? Do you feel like you need access to extra services? That can include legal and accounting services. It can also include some real estate advice and guidance. And it could also include other things that may not necessarily fall within that wheelhouse, like marketing services or revenue planning or some kind of general business planning. Our commitment is that at the end of that evaluation period, if there is some need for some additional professional assistance, we have a bucket of funds that we can allocate and find the right level of professional service that can assist. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're required to take part in any of those services. What we are asking each venue to do is to go through an evaluation where we can say yay or nay, there is a need for this or there isn't a need for this. We kind of recognize that there are venues that are at different stages of their both financial and operational reality. And some of that is directly related to, someone's lease or their financial situation, or venues are in hibernation mode right now and may not need those types of services. So we wanted to provide those services to venues at no cost. Those are funds that the city has allocated that are on top of the $5 million that are part of the grant fund. So who's conducting it? That's Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts. They have a long history of working with artists and artist organizations and the arts. They do have a focus on legal and accounting needs. If you need something different than that, we will be able to identify that through the evaluation process and provide you with some level of professional service. The technical assistance evaluation is required for participation in phase 2, but you are not required to actually take any services if you don't need them. The evaluation we anticipate will be a one-time confidential process with TALA staff, so we are not going to administer that. The way that this process will work is we will share your contact information once you submit your phase 2 application in the portal with TALA staff, and they will contact you and have a confidential conversation that does not include the city or the Long Center. If we need to be involved to identify some content experts that can help venues on the backside of that, the anticipation is we will do that subsequent to that evaluation. The next part of this process is an equity strategic plan, and I know that there were a lot of questions around this. There is a independent consultant that the city of Austin has hired. Her name is Joyce James. She's a nationally respected consultant with respect to DEI planning and workshops, and she will be conducting the equity strategic plan training. So the Economic Development Department is hosting these 3 workshops. They specifically relate to institutional and structural racism. And the hope is that each venue will be able to produce a plan that is both actionable and can be implemented within 1 year of the grant. Applicants have to take part in all 3 sessions, but you do not have to take part in all 3 sessions in order to receive your first round of funding. You just have to have registered for the first session and gone through that process. Each session is 6 hours in length, and they are available on multiple days to ensure that people can, register for one that fits within their schedule. There are some sample strategies that are in the program guidelines that were adopted by council. If you need to reference those for any reason, there is a link on the Long Center Save Austin Venues page that links directly to the program guidelines that should help you. And then if you need a copy of those in some sort of PDF format. There's an email here, atxrecovers@austintexas.gov, and they can answer questions specific to the equity strategic plan, and they can also answer questions about what type of documentation you may need for this. So again, the equity strategic plan workshops are being conducted by Joyce James, who's going to facilitate those, and they'll be hosted by the City of Austin's Economic Development Department. You know, this is another restatement of what the sessions look like. Those dates we did not adjust from the previous slide, and that's my mistake, but we'll get those adjusted before we place this back on the website. The next part of our phase 2 process that the Long Center will be administering specifically is a submission portal that will allow us to provide a number of things. So the first of which is ensuring that venues are eligible to apply for phase 2 funding, and then also asking a series of questions related to vulnerability and impact. Yes, I will walk back through the key dates at the very end after I get through all of this stuff. The submission portal will allow us to provide some weighted scores. We will also provide a breakdown of what the scoring matrix looks like from a percentage standpoint and the types of questions that will be asked. So it's really a series of scored questions that allow us to demonstrate and rank applicants. Again, that's specifically related to vulnerability and impact, which is what was listed in all of the prior resolutions from the city as a primary importance. The application will include some attestations similar to the attestations that were in the phase 1 application that was through DocuSign. This will be a little bit more of a user-friendly experience through an application called Submittable that will be hosted on our website. What we're going to be asking is specific questions related to business interruption, what your percentage of earned revenue was specifically from live music, and the scope and scale of infrastructure that you have related to live music. Your uploaded information and answers to these will be used to calculate your maximum eligible grant. And again, we'll post a brief summary of what the scoring matrix looks like on our website so you guys can kind of appreciate what the breakout looks like. So again, the Long Center is conducting this. We will have some other community experts that will help us provide some level of evaluation. And really the things that are required from venue owners specifically are the listing of information that we had previously advanced to you guys through our Save Austin Venues email list, just saying, hey, get these documents ready, and we can talk about those here in a second. So here's what the portal submission documents look like for us. And these will allow us to sort of verify some of the financial information to ensure that answers are correct and that we're scoring things properly. So federal income tax returns for 2018 and 2019. We are asking for some abbreviated profit and loss statements March through December for 2019 and 2020, so we can compare one year to the other in terms of revenue loss. 2019 and 2020 payroll records, a current balance sheet, a profit and loss statement. In the program guidelines, it asks for a trailing profit and loss statement. And we understand that this may not be a normal function of venues businesses, but if you can provide us with a 12-month profit and loss statement, that will suffice. There are some eligible expenses that we're asking folks to calculate. And on the next slide, we'll talk about what exactly those are. And then some gross revenue year-over-year calculations from 2020 to 2019. So we can, again, kind of look at what revenue loss looks like, and then a revenue detail statement from either 2019 or 2020 if your venue is not in business in 2019. So in terms of eligible expenses, there are a number of things that you guys can utilize. So what's the difference between a 12-month trailing and a year-to-year profit and loss statement? So trailing profit and loss statements essentially assume that you're starting from whatever month you're in. So if it's February right now, your 12-month trailing profit and loss statement would be February to February instead of January to December. That can impact a particular business if their calendar year is how they've been accounting for all of their revenue and expenses from year to year before. We wouldn't ask you to go rejigger that if you didn't need to. So eligible expenses that people can use to calculate their maximum eligible grant would be to think about mortgage or rent for your commercial property. That includes triple net, your utility payments, payroll taxes, whatever benefit programs that you may provide for your employees, if you have technology and software costs. Also, if you've provided some level of sanitation and cleaning services, if you've spent money on PPE or rented any type of equipment to address some COVID safety guidelines, business and commercial property insurance, if you have any fees associated with permits or regulatory fees, maintenance and repair as a function of your business, whether you pay for professional services like attorneys, CPAs, payroll services, any of that stuff, and your property taxes if those are applicable to you. So essentially, what we would need to see all of that calculation is if you have bank statements or canceled checks, whether you have contracts that are in place for that, copies of invoices or payments. If you own your property, whether you have some property tax statements and other itemized expenses. So inside of the submission portal, you'll be able to upload a number of documents that can be relative to that. There's a bunch of different file types that are supported. So we tried to make it as easy as possible for people to just drag and drop stuff inside of a box and not really have to worry about it outside of that. But all of those eligible expenses will be used to calculate your maximum monthly award. So, you know, we're going to ask you guys to help us do a little bit of that, and then we'll work on verifying those maximum eligible monthly awards. The monthly distributions, according to the program guidelines, are up to $40,000 per month for 6 months. The total aggregate grants cannot exceed $140,000. The one thing that I did want to make sure and point out that we've tried to take great pains to discuss in emails and other places is we recognize that the fund will not address all of the potential need that is out there, and that is the specific purpose for the scoring matrix. So the higher you score on the scoring matrix, the greater likelihood you have of, number one, getting a grant, and number two, having it be your maximum eligible expenses. Who's conducting this portion of the phase 2 application? That would be the Long Center and our respective teams. Again, not all eligible applicants will receive funding. We are going to use these questions to place you in a scoring matrix. This is not atypical. If you applied for CSAP funds or some of the other assistance that the city has created last year, this would be very similar to that type of scoring matrix. The enhanced support grants will be allocated to applicants that score the highest on the scoring matrix. So there will be a rank and an associated score. And if your venue closes permanently, the grants will be terminated. If there are additional questions, our website is thelongcenter.org/save-austin-venues/ where we will be placing a link to the portal. We will also be updating our FAQs, and we will also place a recording of this webinar and the associated PowerPoint for people to reference later should they need it. And again, we have a dedicated email that is checked by multiple members of our staff to ensure that we are responding in a timely fashion. That is saveaustinvenues@thelongcenter.org. And we have a phone number that we are checking, 512-457-5181. The caveat for the phone number is that just like everyone else, we're working from home a lot here, so we have to check that remotely. Angela, thanks for your question. There's a question about the deadline to upload all of the required documentation to the portal. So the way that the program guidelines read right now is that we have to score the entire universe of applicants before we can award any funds. So I think the anticipation, at least the request from us, is that as quickly as people can upload and gather their documentation, which is why we sent an email out a couple of weeks ago, was to say, please start getting these things ready. We wanted to make sure that they weren't substantially different or significantly different than some of the other grants that venues would be applying for, like the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant at the federal level through the SBA. The hope is that these things will generally be readily available, but the faster people that do choose to apply and want to apply can upload their documents and complete their applications, the quicker we can kind of get funds out the door. So Let me go back to the key dates so we can talk about that again. So again, we anticipate that the phase 2 grant portal will be open tomorrow. The first session, workshop sessions for the equity strategic plan will be March 2nd, 4th, and 15th. The debrief sessions will be April 12th and 13th. And the strategy sessions will be May 4th and 5th. So that's really all that we have from a PowerPoint standpoint. I would be happy to stick around for a little bit and answer questions if anybody has any additional questions. We were trying to keep this as brief as possible and then provide you with as much backup in reference as possible, because we know everybody's time is valuable right now, especially trying to dig out from all of the stuff that happened last week. So I don't see any other questions in the chat, but we'll keep it open for a couple more minutes in case people have any questions. Otherwise, that's the end of our formal presentation. We thank you guys very much for taking some time, and we really appreciate you tuning in to learn more about this. So a couple questions for us. If we can't get additional funding, can we try the legacy grants if we got our first round of funding? So the answer is no. Technically, if you received an emergency grant through the Austin Live Music Venue Preservation Fund, you're not eligible for the legacy grant. So that's essentially how the city has written these different types of grants. Are we going to give a formal deadline for submission? We would like to have all of our universe of applicants in before March 10th. If we can. That's not necessarily a formal deadline. We're trying to message as much as we can for people to get stuff in as quickly as possible so we can begin the process of funding. So there's another question. Do you also want the 2020 tax return prepared already? That would be lovely if you could provide us that. We also know that, you know, we're right at 45 days from the end of the calendar year. And sometimes, you know, if you have a CPA or a tax preparer, they may not have your stuff entirely together yet. So if you do, great, send it to us. We'll take a look. If not, we totally understand and we'll take whatever we can get. So is the $140,000 total inclusive of the initial 20,000 received? No, it is not. So the 140 total is exclusive to the phase 2 grants. Another question is, if I'm representing 2 venues, will registering once for a workshop suffice for both? Edward, I just encourage you to reach out to us and make sure that we know that that's the case. I mean, I don't want you to register twice and take up 2 spots if it's just one person. We want to make sure that as many people as possible can have the option of, you know, registering from one day or the next. Next question, can you start uploading documents when the portal opens tomorrow? Absolutely. The hope is that people will tune into the portal tomorrow and get their applications done as quickly as possible. So yes, please. That would help us a whole lot be able to start managing that stuff. When to expect the invite for the equity strategic plan? We received that information from the city today. So our anticipation is we'll send something out a little bit later with all of those links to register for the new dates, hopefully before about 6 p.m. tonight. So Steve Wertheimer has a question on percentage of revenue from live music. What are the specifics that help us go into that number? Is it door and bar sales? We've provided a little bit more detail in a couple of the emails that we sent out in terms of how to think about that. And we also have some extra information on inside the submittable portal. I mean, what I will tell you from our practical conversations is anything that's associated with live music, whether it happens to be door and or bar sales, if you have, you know, ancillary sales that are, you know, supporting your live music endeavors, all of that should be applicable. And that's one of the reasons that we're asking you kind of for a detailed revenue breakdown from year to year, so we can help kind of identify, number one, what the percentage loss is, and number two, like how much that's really supporting live music. Will we have a copy of this presentation be available to watch later? Yes, absolutely. We have been recording this webinar and we will post it on our website, and we will also post a copy of the PowerPoint presentation to ensure that people have as much information as they need. Again, I'm going to scroll back over to our web address, if you need that and want to write that down. That should be your center for information, and your ability to contact us should there be any questions as you guys kind of go through the portal. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to shoot us an email at that saveaustinvenues@thelongcenter.org email, and we'll be happy to answer as much as we can. So I guess we're working on questions. Let me get through the next few. Is the live music revenue amount inclusive of promoter sold shows, private shows paid for by a company, or only venue hosted events? I think we'd want to see whatever all of that revenue is, and then have a conversation about what that looks like. I don't think that we're going to try to be exclusive as long as it's helping further live music in the city. Steve Wertheimer asks, can I apply for both of my clubs when the portal opens tomorrow? Yes, they need to be 2 separate applications, but you can 100% apply for both of your clubs. Would roof repairs after this freeze be counted as part of repairs? I think that's something that what we're asking for in terms of eligible expenses is relative to 2019 and 2020. Since this is 2021, that would be something that, we want to take into consideration somehow, some way, but that is not something we anticipated. One of the other things that bits of information that we have gotten from the city of Austin is a whole host of federally funded opportunities to get those specific weather related repairs funded from places like FEMA. So that will be some of the information that we send out as well this afternoon or this evening, in addition to all the equity strategic plan stuff. So we were right at 3:30, and I had hoped to get you guys out at exactly 30 minutes because I know everybody's time is valuable. One last question. While we wait for that question, again, our intention as the administrators of this fund is to be able to provide as many one-on-one individual answers as we can as possible. Email is definitely the quickest way to get a hold of us, but we are happy to call people back and discuss one-on-one if we can. If there's anything anybody needs or has questions as they go through the portal, we're happy to call people back or provide some email assistance should that be necessary. And if people feel like they want like a one-on-one Zoom kind of thing, we would be happy to do that as well, pending schedules and whatnot. So having said all of that, if you want to arrange a one-on-one Zoom conversation with some of us, my suggestion would be to send an email to that Save Austin Venues at thelongcenter.org email, and we'll get in touch with you to see how we can help you collect whatever questions you need and then answer those as quickly as possible. So refund, this is the last question. Would refund to promoters from cancellation of South by Southwest count as part of revenue? I'm not sure whether you're asking whether that's part of revenue loss. I would say, my best advice to you is to represent that as a loss. And if we have a question about whether that's specifically the case, then we can work with you on an individual basis to make sure that that's represented properly. But I would imagine that that's something that is not revenue that's realized. Yes, and so for the work sessions for the dates that have now changed, we will be sending you brand new links to Eventbrite stuff that have the new dates, the new information, and the new opportunities to sign up. So the question is, will we get those if we signed up for this? Will you get those new dates? If you're not getting the emails, Laura, I would suggest that you send an email to the Save Austin Venues at thelongcenter.org and make sure that we have your appropriate information so we can include you on all of those lists. The way that we collected and built our email list was there were 2 opportunities to include a name and an email in your phase 1 application. That was a question specifically about ownership and a question specifically about the applicant. So if you weren't one of those, then there's a pretty fair chance that we don't have your information. So as much as you can send us that will be incredibly helpful. All right, well, if there's not any other questions, we're very happy to do whatever we can and help however we can during this really incredibly tough time. We know that people are struggling, and our intention is to try to, help get funds out the door as quickly as possible. I think that will go faster the more we can get your assistance getting applications in quickly, so we can start scoring and start all of these processes. But our intention is to be as communicative as possible and to help manage expectations as much as we can moving forward. So wish you guys the best and hope everybody's staying safe. And we will be in touch by email very, very soon. Okay, thank you guys.